atış! Lan! Olur kıtası. Hazır ol. Selam. Dur. Kaç.
Merhaba asker.
A joint media conference in Ankara where three power brokers of peace in Syria have met in an effort to reduce the violence in the war-torn country. Ilya Petrenko reports.
The guarantors have met in Ankara, Turkey, and there's absolutely no doubt about their commitment to what the three countries are doing together, though they are all still here with their own ambitions. Tayyip Erdogan keeps saying that his country won't tolerate the armed Kurdish militias in northern Syria. So the so-called olive branch military op will continue no matter what. Hassan Rouhani, the Iranian leader, says that external powers, though he did specifically mention the US and Israel, are trying to use the terrorists on the ground in Syria to reach some of their own goals. Vladimir Putin proudly speaks about the Russian efforts to evacuate eastern Ghouta, which, as we understand, has paid off with the evacuation of more than 150,000 civilians and some of the rebels too. Although perhaps the most important point that was made by the Russian president was that Moscow is in possession of some intelligence that points to some radicals planning to destroy the road towards peace with a chemical weapons attack.
Our joint strategic goal is to eliminate the terrorists who keep trying to destabilize the situation on the ground and sabotage the peace process. They are doing this in every way possible. We have obtained undeniable evidence of planned provocation by the militants with the use of chemical agents.
Then came a little surprise from Mr. Erdogan. There were no questions planned, but the Turkish leader encouraged the audience to start asking them. And then we heard the one that the journalists had been expecting for 2 days about America being back and forth over their future role in Syria. And here's what I mean by that.
We'll be coming out of Syria like very soon, very soon, very soon. We're coming out. Saudi Arabia is very interested in our decision. And I said, well, you know, you want us to say maybe you're going to have to pay.
We are in Syria to fight ISIS. That is our mission. And that mission isn't over, and we're going to complete that mission.
So, who was first to jump in? Iran's President Hassan Rouhani couldn't miss his chance to bash Washington in this case.
The US says one thing one day and then a completely different thing the next, so we cannot trust their words and actions. It seems they want to benefit from Syria as much as possible.
And all Mr. Erdogan wants to say to the US administration, stop arming and funding the Kurds, full stop.
Let's put some analysis on all that now. In Tehran is Syed Mustafa Koshcheshem, who's a political analyst. Welcome back to RT. Now, the three have been talking today using a shared common language. Along the way, that's not always been the case between the three countries that were represented at that summit. How realistic, then, do you think it is for these trilateral efforts to rebuild Syria, especially, of course, the US is still there?
Hello, and thanks for having me. Well, you know, geopolitically speaking, some 7 years ago when the war started, admittedly by the United States allies, Saudi Arabia, Turkey, and Qatar, at least according to former U.S. Vice President Joe Biden and Michael Flynn, the former National Security Advisor and head of the Pentagon Intelligence Department, they both blamed Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and Turkey for the chaos in the Middle East, and they acknowledged that the United States was completely aware and informed of, you know, imminent chaos in eastern Syria and western Iraq. When they started, they were one coalition of the willing to wear off the power of Iran's regional allies, Syria and Iraq, and Hezbollah of Lebanon. And also at that time, Iran's soft power was at good levels, but Iran's hard power was not did not go any further than its geographical borders. But now, after 7 years, both the soft power and hard power of Iran and Russia have grown in the Middle East, and they have now won the upper hand in Syria and in Iraq. Cracks are widening and rifts are widening among the coalition, the former coalition that was led by the United States, between Qatar and Saudi Arabia, between Turkey and Saudi Arabia, between Turkey and the UAE. There are rifts that are widening among these, not just because of their problems in their bilateral ties, but also because of their geopolitical differences. Turkey and Qatar are distancing themselves from Saudi Arabia and from the United States somehow with regard to Syria, and they have come closer to Iran and Russia. Even very recently, we heard news from the Turkish officials that even the French have requested partnership in the Astana talks. And the reason is that even the French have come to realize that if they want to become a part of the political decision-making in the region, they need to join Iran and Russia and, of course, now Turkey. So the United States has grown so weak in Syria and in the region that we heard just very recently that Donald Trump said they want to pull out unless the Saudis pay for their stay in Syria, away from the business formula that he is trying actually to milk the Saudis. The point is that the United States has grown so weak that it cannot have any major say or any say in Syria. So what they are doing is that they are playing negativism. They are trying to sabotage peace and welfare of the Syrian nation, and they are trying to sabotage restoration of stability in Syria and in the region in order to be given a part in there. That's what the French and what the United States president have repeatedly stressed, that they are to be given some part or they sabotage the peace process in the region.